I've been looking for an affordable laptop for a friend of mine over the past few weeks. And when I came across this deal for the ASUS Vivobook Go 15 at this German laptop shop and checked out the specs, I thought, wait a minute. An OLED display, a Ryzen 5, 16GB of RAM, 512GB SSD for $379 instead of $555. Man, whether she wants it or not, this thing is getting ordered and tested. I've been putting it through its paces for over a week now, and we're going to go through everything together. So let's go.
This is Hubwood.
And let me make this clear right away. I bought the laptop with my own money and ASUS had no idea that I'm doing this review. It's pure coincidence that there have been other ASUS devices on my desk recently. And before we continue, a warning. There are very different versions of the ASUS Vivobook Go 15 with significant differences in display and processor specs compared to this one. So pay close attention if you're using this video as a buying guide. Normally I would find it hard to recommend a laptop for only 379 euros or dollars. They're usually junk on so many levels, but this one is honestly incredible for the price. No joke, it's pretty insane. On paper alone, it already packs a punch. A 15.6-inch OLED display, while ASUS claims it manages up to 400 nits. And that alone is absolutely insane for only $379 or euros. Then there's the Ryzen 5 7520U, although to be fair, it's a simple, energy-efficient 4-core processor with multi-threading, making it effectively an 8-thread CPU. The integrated graphics in the form of the Radeon 610M are more suitable for everyday tasks and only very limited gaming, but more on that later. And then you get 16GB of DDR5, 5500 megatransfer RAM. That's almost absurd for the price. Plus, there's a 512GB M.2 PCIe Express Generation 3 SSD. You'll need to get your own operating system, but at this price point, whether with or without a discount, that's completely fine. Setting it up isn't difficult, although it might seem intimidating for beginners. But there are plenty of great tutorials on YouTube on how to do that. Additionally, we have a basic Wi-Fi module with the now somewhat dated Wi-Fi 5 standard and Bluetooth 4.2. This was clearly a cost-saving measure, but it's likely sufficient for most users, even if you can't fully utilize a gigabit connection. Download speeds max out at around 350 to 400 megabits, translating to around 40 megabytes per second. The battery has a 50 watt-hour capacity, which isn't much on paper, but the battery life, well, no, we'll discuss that in detail shortly because it was quite surprising. It also comes with a small proprietary 65 watt power adapter, meaning it's a simple plug and not USB-C. Unfortunately, the Vivobook Go 15 cannot be charged via said USB-C port. Let's start with what's perhaps the biggest weakness of this Vivobook Go 15. The build quality. The device is entirely made out of plastic and the lid can be pressed in a bit too easily for my taste when closed. Looking closely between the display and the base, you'll notice a significant gap. The display can't be opened with one hand at all. And the lid is quite bendy, flimsy and wobbles significantly when adjusted. However, it doesn't wobble at all when typing even really fast. The hinges, well, it's hard to say how durable they'll be over time, but I'm not the biggest fan of them. When switching direction, the back of the laptop flexes a bit. On the plus side, the screen can be opened almost 180 degrees. Why almost? Because it effectively stops at around 75 degrees as it tends to spring back slightly. Today's tested model has a shiny silver finish, but it's also available in black or gray-green. Fingerprints show up quickly depending on the lighting, but are easy to clean off. The design is rather subtle and simple, except for the logo on the top of the lid and the neon orange rubber feet at the bottom. I have to admit, the keyboard initially put me off unfairly. It feels cheap at first. The keys are made out of clacky plastic with a slightly rough texture. My model also doesn't have backlit keys, but it's actually great for typing thanks to the 1.4mm key travel and quite generous layout. If you're buying this for writing, you won't go wrong. Maybe just order a desk lamp as well. I should mention that the enter key here is a small one, but you get a kind of full numpad. And I didn't miss any function keys over here. There's even a hotkey to disable the touchpad. Speaking of which, the touchpad is on the smaller side by today's standards and is slightly offset to the left. It works fine, but it's a very basic version. The clicks also sound pretty cheap. Now, the ports are unfortunately quite poorly placed, or to put it in another way, it almost feels like this laptop was designed for left-handers. On the left side, there's just one USB 2.0 port, mainly suitable for a mouse or something similar, not external drives or let alone USB hubs. There are no ports on the back, and on the right side you'll find the power connector, an HDMI 2.0 port, a USB Type-A 3.2 port, a USB-C 3.2 port, which does not support display out or charging, and a 3.5mm audio jack. So 3 USB ports in total, one of which is USB 2, and the placement on the right side means cables can easily get in your way. And heads up, there is no LAN port. The port situation is minimalistic and the layout is inconvenient if you need a lot of external devices. But the integrated webcam comes with a kill switch, which is good. Oh, and by the way, this is what the integrated webcam looks like and what the integrated microphone sounds like. And this is what it sounds like when I'm typing on the keyboard while recording. Now let's move on to one of the highlights, the OLED display. This is already very unusual in the $550 or euros price range without the discount. And for $379, it's a killer argument. It's a glossy Full HD OLED display with 60 Hz, and I measured the brightness myself, confirming an excellent 400 nits. Now, this isn't bright enough for direct sunlight, but it works fine in the shade, and for indoor use, it's no problem at all. The color accuracy is also outstanding with 100% coverage for sRGB, 92% for NTSC, 94% for Adobe RGB and 100% for the P3 color space. This makes it perfectly suitable for professional photo or even video editing. The speakers are surprisingly okay for this price range. Of course, they lack bass and the maximum volume isn't super loud, though acceptable. However, the sound remains clear and largely distortion-free. I've seen much worse speakers in more expensive laptops. Important notice, since Windows isn't pre-installed and you'll need to set it up yourself, make sure to install the My ASUS app to enable battery saving modes and OLED Care, which prevents pixel burn-in on the OLED screen. You can also use the app to switch performance modes and install updates. Let's talk about the cooling system, temperatures, performance and fan noise. The laptop offers 3 performance modes that can be toggled with FN+F or in the My ASUS app: performance mode, standard mode and whisper mode. The main difference here lies in fan speed. In whisper mode, the fan is mostly off, making the Vivobook Go 15 completely silent. Even under full CPU load or during gaming, it remains pleasantly quiet. Performance-wise, the differences are minor because in whisper mode the CPU only receives slightly less power if at all. Most people would likely prioritize quiet operation while the temps remain fine. In performance mode, the fan becomes audible under heavy load but remains relatively quiet compared to larger or more powerful laptops. Temperatures are absolutely fine across all 3 modes, thanks to the low power consumption for the CPU of only 15 to 20 watt, staying in the safe range of 62 to 75 degrees Celsius, even under full load. So it seems as if ASUS has installed a more than sufficient cooling system here, despite it being so basic. By the way, the laptop's surface does not get warm like ever. For personal preference, I would have liked more significant differences between the 3 performance modes considering the wattage. Alright, the 50 Wh battery really surprised me. Not so much the battery itself, but how little power the Vivobook Go 15 consumes thanks to its efficient Ryzen processor, resulting in impressive battery life despite the relatively small capacity. When on idle, with the display dimmed to 20% and Wi-Fi activated, it lasts an astonishing 17 hours on silent mode. The entire laptop then consumes an average of only 2.9 watts. Even during a YouTube full screen test, it lasted an impressive 12 hours, drawing just 4.2 watts with video playback and audio output on average. And that's incredible, especially in this price range. I don't think there's anything comparable right now. I even tested gaming performance on battery. Without an FPS cap and running at full power in whisper mode. It lasted 2.5 hours in World of Warcraft and 2 hours and 5 minutes in The Witcher 3. What? The Witcher 3 runs on this thing? Yep, but more on that shortly. All in all, these are exceptional battery run times. You can easily access the Vivobook Go 15's internals by unscrewing the 10 small Phillips screws on the back and carefully prying the top and bottom apart with a fingernail or thin plastic. Inside you'll find the M.2 SSD, which can be replaced or upgraded quickly and easily. The RAM, unfortunately, is soldered, which isn't a catastrophe for a laptop like that, where 16GB should be sufficient for most people. The somewhat weak Wi-Fi module and the battery can also be swapped out without any issue. Now for performance. In Cinebench R23, it scored 5,283 points for multi-core and 1,180 points for the single-core performance. Keep in mind that this is a very light 4-core CPU with the now aging Zen 2 architecture. Even with hyperthreading providing 8 threads, it's not exactly groundbreaking, but sufficient for this laptop. In Cinebench 2024, it achieved 296 multi-core points and 60 single-core points. In PCMark 10, the Vivobook Go 15 scored up to around 4,225 points in both performance and silent mode. The integrated graphics are the weak point here, but everyday tasks like browsing and responsiveness are completely fine. By the way, on a fresh installation, the laptop boots into Windows in only 12 seconds and waking from sleep takes only 1 to 2 seconds. And that are great numbers. The SSD offers read and write speeds of about 1.5 GB per second, which is pretty basic but sufficient for most tasks this laptop is likely to handle. Faster speeds aren't necessary for typical use cases and won't be noticed by most users anyway. In the budget system benchmark for Premiere Pro, it scored 1,029 points. You can technically edit 4K footage on this, though not very smoothly. Larger projects are also limited by the 16GB of RAM. However, simpler Full HD videos, travel films and similar projects should be no problem at all. Photoshop also works well, thanks to the excellent display, even with more demanding and larger files. You can also run Blender on the Ryzen 5 7520U, but real-time rendering and exporting images are very slow. It's not a great choice for demanding 3D applications, but simpler CAD projects should be manageable. In the Blender benchmark, it scored a weak 58 points. And finally, let's check out some lightweight gaming on the ASUS Vivobook Go 15. By the way, all footage was recorded via a capture card on an external PC, so there's no performance loss. First, let me remind you, modern AAA games are out of the question. You'll need to stick to simpler games, indie or older titles. But World of Warcraft is playable if you're okay with 720p resolution and medium settings without anti-aliasing. That'll get you around 30 to 60 FPS in most scenarios. For raids or action-packed scenes, you could further lower the graphics. The game's core is, after all, 20 years old, so it should be doable. In CS2, I achieved a somewhat playable FPS between 50 and 60 in a bot match on Dust 2 using low settings at 720p with FSR set to balanced. I mean, 20 years ago we managed to play Counter-Strike 1.6 with similar performance, right? And yes, as mentioned earlier during the battery test, The Witcher 3 runs as well, at 720p with low settings and FSR set to performance. It's just about playable with 25 FPS in cities and up to 40 FPS in other areas. Sure, it does look quite blurry that way, but on a smaller 15-inch screen, some might still find it tolerable if you're not too picky with such an office laptop. The 2.5D platformer Trine 2 is a great example of a well-optimized indie game for this laptop. At 900p and high settings, I got smooth FPS between 50 and 60, and the game looks quite good. Life is Strange 1 works fine even at native Full HD resolution and medium settings, delivering around 30 FPS, sometimes dropping to 25. And since the game is more like a playable movie without scenes that require a quick reaction, that's absolutely fine in that case. I also briefly tested a VU emulator and Mario Kart 8 ran smoothly at close to 60 FPS at 720p. Definitely fun for casual gaming. And of course, all the emulators for N64, SNES, PS1, PS2, Sega, etc. work flawlessly as well, of course. And sure, games like Minecraft, Roblox, Diablo 3, Civilization, League of Legends, Genshin Impact, Valorant, etc. They are perfectly playable as well. Overall, the ASUS Vivobook Go 15 is a laptop that's definitely worth its price in that configuration, whether it's around $550 or especially on sale for under $400 or euros. I can absolutely recommend it if it's on sale. Yes, there are compromises in build quality, but at this price point you probably won't find anything better. I'd choose it over questionable AliExpress laptop deals by unknown China brands without hesitation. Thanks to its excellent display, it's even suitable for content creators working on photos, image editing and simpler videos, especially in Full HD. For browsing, movies, office tasks or a full day at the university, it's absolutely sufficient. While gaming is only possible to a limited extent, depending on the game, it's certainly doable for lighter stuff. I was quite impressed by its OLED screen, the decent keyboard and most of all, the exceptional battery life in this price range. And if you're interested in a bit bigger 17-inch laptop, take a look at my Lenovo V17 review afterwards. And that's all for today. If you liked the video, don't forget to like or subscribe to the channel for more laptop reviews and laptop stuff. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye and tschüss.